My name is Myra Weiss. I'm a member of the Jewish Book Festival Committee and have been since its inception 24 years ago. So coming here is like coming home to me. So I want to say hello to all of you, and to those of you who I haven't seen in 3 years? It's nice. I'd like to, Rebecca is not here. We have a new program Federation member, Rebecca Russell. She's our, where is she? Here she is. This is Rebecca, the lady of the hour. She's new at this too. First and foremost, I want to thank Zoe and her sisterhood committee. Zoe is always comes through, and it's like coming home to my sister, and her committee is always amazing, and we will eat after the presentation. Okay, Rabbi Epstein, you have met, and I think I'm going to cut it off. I'm going to introduce Rebecca Tarr. No. And Andrea Tarr, thank you. Okay, I'm going to introduce Andrea, and she is going to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Myra. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. It's lovely to see people in person. I want to get started by giving you a little background on our guest, our author today. Yelena Lembersky is the granddaughter of a Soviet Jewish artist, Felix Lembersky. Yelena is an architect, an artist, and an author. She has previously written a book about her grandfather.
We need to look like it more or a little louder speaking.
Okay, can you hear me better now? Okay. Yelena has written a book previously about her grandfather titled Felix Lembersky, Paintings and Drawings. Yelena also wrote the memoir that she is sharing with us today. She'll be speaking about that. It was co-written with her mother, Yelena Lembersky. And some background here, Yelena grew up in Leningrad, which we now refer to as St. Petersburg, and was able to emigrate to the US in 1987. Her degrees are in art and architecture and are from the University of Michigan and MIT. Yelena is also a frequent guest on NPR. She is also the great niece of Mikhail Zenzovsky, who was the founding director and singer in the Theater of Musical Comedy at Petrograd, Leningrad during the Stalin terror. And after refusing to give up his theater, he was imprisoned. Since the late 1990s, Yelena has headed the Lembersky Center for Arts and Society, which is part of the Unitera Foundation. She organizes exhibitions and educational programs on the art for social justice and paintings of her grandfather. The Lembersky Center is not far from Yelena's Boston area home. So today, please welcome our very special guest, Yelena Lembersky.
Thank you, Rabbi. Здравствуйте. Thank you, Andrea. My name is Yelena. I would like to begin by thanking the Jewish Book Festival for hosting me here. This is my first visit to LA and San Gabriel Pomona Valley. I have to tell you that I have given talks around Boston and on Zoom, on the NPR, as we already mentioned. This is my first stop on my book tour. This book tour, I have to tell you, will take me to Michigan, Maryland, Virginia, Connecticut, Toronto, and London, UK. But I'm delighted to start it here where it's warm and sunny. I also have to tell you that I felt that the universe was, talking to me, because for many years in Boston area, I was a member of none other but Temple Shalom, SHALOM. So when I was putting your temple on my website, I thought surely there was a misspell. No, I guess it's the Medford that misspelled. So thank you, Temple Shalom, for hosting me. I want to I want to thank Andrea, Barbara, Myra, and everyone on the book committee for selecting it. I know that you guys went through days and days of reading wonderful, miserable time reading wonderful 200 books of wonderful Jewish authors, and of all of them, I'm glad to be one. I'm going to now embarrass Rebecca Russell. Rebecca, thank you for taking care of many, many details of this trip. Rebecca picked me up at the airport in person, and I feel so terrible for making Rebecca drive through this crazy LA rush hour. And every day is a rush hour, every hour is a rush hour. But I'm also very grateful because you made it so easy. But that's not why I'm grateful. I'm grateful because we got to talk with Rebecca, and we laughed, and we talked, and we laughed, and now I'm coming here and I don't feel that I'm talking to a room of strangers. I'm done embarrassing you. So what was it like to live in Russia? People asked me when I first came to the United States, to Michigan, in 1987, was everyone poor? Was there food in the stores? Was everyone a drunk? And people asked me what it was like to be a Jew, and I could not tell them. I could not tell them because I barely spoke English. And I also wasn't ready to speak about my childhood when I was 17. But I do want to read this first excerpt. This is from the middle of the book, wait for it. Yes, from the chapter called Lessons and the Unspoken. So here it is. My school teacher tells our class. So I should say, okay, backtrack. My mother and I wrote this book together. The first chapter is narrated in the voice of me as a young girl. The second chapter is written direct words of my mother. And the third is back to me as an adolescent. So this is part one when I'm a young elementary school child. My school teacher tells our class that the Russians are a strong and courageous people, that Russia is a big brother for the other small friendly nations, and the Russians gave them their freedom. Gulnara, please stand up, she tells to my classmate. Children, look at Gulnara. She is Tatar. Her people have an autonomous territory in our Soviet Union. Now, Masha, children, look at Masha. Our Masha comes from Buryato-Mongolian tribes, all the way on the other side of our great republic. I should tell you, by the way, that Buryat people were exiled by Stalin to that faraway place. When it comes to Jews, the teacher says nothing. No one does. The Jews have autonomous region called Birobidzhan in the far east near northern Korean border. Very few Jews live there, but Jews live everywhere else, and no one talks about us. Jews fought in the World War II, served in combat, rode tanks into battles. Jews fought against the Nazis with partisan troops during the occupation. When they earned their medals of valor, they became valiant Soviet men. Never Jews, the courageous nation of heroes. Our school curriculum of ancient history begins with Egypt, Greece, and Rome. We learn that these were great civilizations. They had pyramids, Hera, and Zeus, and Acropolis in Athens, where I cannot go because our Soviet borders are closed. But there is no mention of Jerusalem or ancient Judea. What does anti-Semite mean, Grandma? I asked. There were people called Semites in the ancient Mesopotamia. And the anti-Semites that they live next door, don't ever repeat this word, she said. So I will talk about my memoir a little more in the second part. When we came to this country, my mother and I decided to never speak about our past. We didn't have the right words to tell about why my mother decided to emigrate, why and how she was able to bring several hundred paintings by her father out of Russia, what was life like for 9 years in Leningrad when we were refuseniks. We could not talk about her, the criminal charges against her and the prison sentence. But before I begin, I want to talk about Ukraine. Does anyone follow the war in Ukraine? So, are any of you have roots in Eastern Europe? Where?
Ukraine, probably, the Pale,
What place?
what we refer to as the Pale.
The Pale settlement, yeah. Do you know the town?
At home I have
Anyone else?
We come from Hungary, and don't ask me where because, but Brett, his family comes from Brett, Hungary. I don't know what town.
Mhm. Mhm. Anyone else? Poland, what's up, what town? Czekanovich.
Lithuania, town called
Vilkamer.
My mom was born in Kiev.
In Kiev. Wow. Well, how did they come out?
She managed to get here by the time she was 4 years old, and it was a fun trip.
Okay, was that before the war
Yes.
or just before the war? Yeah. Yeah, that was, yeah.
Which war?
I know, that's a good question. I know. World War I, World War II, Holodomor.
Not me personally, my married godson is from Czech. My children's great grandfather was born in Ukraine and came to Ellis Island to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And since the war, even though my children are adults, I've had a Ukraine flag with a peace step hanging on front of my house. I was just telling Andrea last night, it's all tattered. I never thought the war would last this long, but it's been the opportunity to educate my adult children about their heritage, and
Yeah.
it's very upsetting.
Yeah, it's devastating, and I don't think on the eve of the war, I think people, even in Ukraine, the analysts were saying this war would never happen because Ukraine was always such a protected region, minority of Russia. It just seemed incomprehensible, and no one could imagine, including Russians, that this war would last as long, and it's absolutely devastating. I think everyone I met, both in Russian-speaking community in Boston and other areas, are in full support of Ukraine, and many in Russia as well. We just don't hear about them. But I want to tell you my first memory, my first visit to Odessa. So Odessa is, I'm sure all of you know, so this is Russia, this is European part, right? This is the Urals. I grew up in Leningrad, which is St. Petersburg now, and it's right next to Finland. I'm sure many of you know. Very cold. It's the same latitude as northern Canada, Alberta. But my grandmother was born in Moldova, in a place that is very close to Odessa. So now her town is part of Odessa region in Ukraine. So it's right about here on the Black Sea. And so when I was about 10 years old, my grandmother took me for the first time to visit Odessa. And the train, we went by train, and it took 3 days. And when you're 10 years old, you're stuck in one place. All you can do is sit and look out of the window. And as the train traverses Russia, Middle Russia, Belarus, and then Ukraine, you can see the landscape gradually changing from gray skies and kind of brown, freshly tilled fields to pale green fields of Belarus. And when you come to Ukraine, you see this bursting, wonderful, full of greenery gardens, and the sky is blue and it's sun-drenched. And the train makes many stops. It's not a Seva, it's a local. And we get out on every stop, even if it's 1 minute. And at the train stops, women the local women dressed in kerchiefs and sometimes bright or sometimes not so bright clothes, and they bring foods to sell to supplement their income, the things that they grow in their backyard. So in Russia, they would bring hard-boiled eggs and tomatoes with dill and garlic. And in Belarus, they will bring varenishki with cabbage and potatoes. When you come to Ukraine, there was first fresh crops, fresh strawberries, full of flavor, sour cherries, sun-dried sunflower seeds. And in Russia, in Leningrad, you don't see those things very much, even in season. So traveling by this train, you could see that Ukraine was a different place. It felt like a fairy tale. Even then, even when Ukraine was a different country, and Odessa was half Jewish, also Greeks, very international, beautiful city, lots of trees. And I have the warmest memories of that place. And I think one of the reasons so many Russians went to Ukraine, to Odessa, to other places by the Black Sea, doesn't give Russia the right to claim this country as their own. It makes it even more despicable that this war is happening, because they should know better and protect this place. And this is one of the reasons why I am supporting Ukraine. But when I stop and think about it, I have to tell you that those young men, the Russian men, who are now forced to go to the front lines, maybe children of my classmates, maybe children of the neighbors that I grew up with, maybe even their neighbors themselves, because they moved the cutoff line at age 50. And it's devastating on all sides. So, I mean, do you have any thoughts about this war? Do you want to share, or should I talk about memoir? We'll talk about the book. My childhood, my early childhood was very happy. I lived in Leningrad, not the Leningrad that you may imagine, not the beautiful palaces, not the Hermitage. I lived in a new part where all buildings look the same. But our neighborhood was full of warm, kind people. And when we first moved there, neighbors brought bags of sugar, so we have a sweet life. And when somebody baked a cake, they brought slices to every neighbor. My friend lived several floors up, so all I had to do is take an elevator, and I had a play date. The neighborhood right outside of our door was full of grandmothers who raised us all together. So if we didn't dress right, or if we stepped on the green grass, we were told. And it was wonderful, because you never felt alone in that neighborhood. And I lived with my mother and my grandmother, the all-women household, and it was serene and peaceful. And the streets were gray, but in my house, we had several hundred paintings by my grandfather. In fact, this is my first book, and I am going to just send it off. So I brought a couple of those books, so just flip it through and you will get a chance to look at it again later. So my grandfather was a well-known painter in Leningrad, and some of his paintings were in museums and galleries, and I would see them on display in major public places. Those were the earlier paintings, when he painted as a realist. But many paintings in our home could never be exhibited in the Soviet Union. And the reason is because our Soviet government told the painters what they should paint and how. The painting had to look like a photograph, and it had to show a happy Soviet life. So strong men, rosy, full-bodied farm women, and it was a lie. And my grandfather refused to paint this way, and so his paintings could never be shown outside our home. So what do you do? So he died when I was 1 year old, but my mother and my grandmother continued his legacy. So what do? You show this at home. So on the days when guests would come in, we would move the furniture and we would bare a wall, and my grandmother would bring the paintings out of the closet one by one and line it and put them in stacks against the walls. And I remember those paintings, and one of them I remember was called Babi Yar. And I have to tell you that when I first came to this country, no one in this country knew what Babi Yar was. Does anyone know? Does anyone not know what Babi Yar is? Okay. So people here knew about Auschwitz and Treblinka, but nobody knew about the Holocaust by bullets in the Soviet Union, because it was behind the Iron Fence curtain. So Babi Yar is a site near Kiev, where 33,000 people were murdered, Jews were murdered in the course of 3 days, and then 70,000+. And on the way here, Rebecca told me that your community had read the names of the Babi Yar victims in January. So this is amazing.
Soviets dropped a missile or whatever on it.
In March 1st, the Russians were bombing the tower, and part of the bomb hit the sacred site, the cemetery. And I have to say, does anybody read forward? Sometimes, yeah.
Jewish newspaper out of New York.
Yeah, Jewish newspaper, the oldest Jewish newspaper out of New York. So on March 3rd, after that bombing, I published an article about Babi Yar and the despicable war, Putin's war in Ukraine. Because, so I heard, so in Russia, in the Soviet Russia, nobody spoke about the Holocaust. There was no mention of Holocaust in the Soviet Union. But in my home, I heard the name Babi Yar since I was a very young girl. And the reason is one of the three paintings by my grandfather are the earliest known artistic representation of Babi Yar. I have the slides that I could show, but I don't know, should I do this? Okay, so me wait for it. Okay, Jake,
You got this, just screen share and
share screen,
PowerPoint.
Yelena, do you need to share the screen?
sharing. Okay. So this, oh, wait. So this painting, and I'm sorry you have to crank your heads over there. This painting, it's in the book, and I have some prints out of these paintings at the table. This painting was finished in 1952, and if you know a little bit of Soviet history, this was the last year of Stalin and the worst year of Stalin terror against the Jews. So this is the painting when my grandfather turned to this memory. He had lost both of his parents in Berdichev massacre that preceded Babi Yar. His mother on the left was a pianist, and his father was a scholar. He was wounded in World War I. And when my grandfather was looking for his parents, trying to find out what had happened, the Soviet Red Cross told them that they're missing, no further information. So he started to piece together one by one from neighbors, witness accounts, from few articles that appeared during the war, what had happened. And he began to work on these three paintings at the end, towards the end of the war. And this is the earliest one. And you can see the Babi Yar ravine. There are a lot of details. I don't know, does anybody want to describe it, or is it too much? Yeah. So I have the prints later on. But I have to tell you that for many years he was trying to show it in the Soviet Union, and he was never allowed because the Soviet policy was not to create knowledge of Holocaust and not to create empathy towards the Jews. Last year, a year ago, I was working with Kiev group, Babi Yar Holocaust Memorial Center, to send these paintings to Kiev for an exhibition to commemorate the 80th anniversary of Babi Yar. And we were, I have to tell you, and this is a true story, we were going to send this work to Kiev for the exhibition to open this past spring. So once again, Putin war put these plans on hold, and these paintings now have been shown in many places across the United States. This is his best known work. It appeared to countless articles and posts, but it was never shown in Eastern Europe. So one day. So my mother decided to immigrate, and she decided to immigrate not because of anti-Semitism, which she knew very well, and not for economic opportunities. She wanted to leave to save the art of her father. My grandmother and I were planning to live together in 1980, but only my grandmother was allowed to leave. She left alone and took most of the paintings with you, and she moved to Ann Arbor. My mother and I were held back, and so you understand, remember the context. In 1979, Soviets invaded Afghanistan. And in 1980, right in the middle of our applying, America and the Western NATO countries boycotted Moscow Olympic Games. A huge embarrassment for the Soviets, and as always, the Russians retaliate against the Jews. So we couldn't leave. But miraculously, my mother received our exit visa in 1981. We thought we were very lucky. We started to pack. My mother gave away the books we couldn't take, our furniture. Apartment was almost empty. And then I came from school home, and I saw 3 men from Soviet police raid our home. They were turning everything upside down. They were tapping mattresses, pillows. They were going through my personal clothes. And when they left, they carried out a 3-liter bottle of rubbing alcohol and our exit visas. We could not leave. The criminal investigation was started against my mother. Everybody told her that it was a mistake and a misunderstanding, and she will be soon free to go. And so I will read an excerpt from the beginning of my memoir, like a drop of ink in a downpour. On the morning when she was leaving for her trial, a knock on the door, a muffled, tentative thud. Not Mama's. All that morning, September 15, 1981, I had walked holding my thumbs folding into my fist, a Russian superstition. Hold your thumb and think of someone to bring them good luck. Mama does it for me when I have a test at school. She did not, do you know that superstition? No. She did not let me come with her to the trial. You don't need to see the service. Although some had advised her to take the child, take the child for leniency and the compassion of the jury. Like hell they will have compassion, she said. I watched from my window as she walked down the muddy footpaths, stepping on islands of broken concrete. She went towards the metro station called Lenin's Avenue, and she did not detour to Счастливая, Lucky Street, even though I asked her to. That's too bad, I thought. She turned around to face me and kept walking backward. Good luck, I yelled out so she could hear me, and then quietly, so that luck would fly to her like a swarm of bees. I waved her hard to feel pain on my wrists, just in case. The knock is not hers. I opened the door. It's Zhenya, one of Mama's many work friends. Zhenya, a school teacher, now standing before me, is rustling in her mind through pages of textbooks on preteen psychology, waiting for a difficult heart-to-heart conversation. I cut her off. Should I get my things? So my mother received a prison sentence for the crime she did not commit. She was innocent. I was 11 years old, and I was left without a family. And you know that you have to be strong. You know, be strong, be a man, even if you're a little girl. And to be strong, you have to be either numb or very angry. And I can tell you that I was numb and I was full of rage. I have to tell you, and my mother told me not to put this in a book, but I did. I can never judge those teenage kids who come and shoot up the school. And please forgive me for saying this, but I know that feeling. And that feeling comes from the extreme powerlessness. But what saved me was my mother. So for the first few, so she could not call me. I could not call her on the phone. I could not see her, and for the first several weeks, we could not write letters to each other. But after she was moved from prison to a women forced labor camp, she was able to write to me, and she wrote every day, and she sent a letter every other day. And we saved those letters and brought them to the United States. I did not read them. But when I was preparing, when we were working on this memoir, I forced myself to start rereading them. And I was shocked, I was stunned by how much influence she had on me in those letters. To this day, I'm following almost verbatim things that she told me that I had to accomplish in my life. And she wrote those things because we did not know, she did not know if she would come out and return to me. So a short excerpt. Maybe. Okay, so we included some of those excerpts, and I just want to read this to bring her voice into this conversation. So from forced labor camp, December 81. My precious girl, Dochenka, my daughter, after 3 months of silence, we can now communicate. So let's use this opportunity. Write to me about everything that goes on with you, what interests you or leaves you indifferent. Send me your compositions, stories, and poems. Send your drawings in large envelopes. Let me know what you read and see, where you go, and who you meet. My Lastechka, my little bird. I will be allowed to have visitation, which means that you and I can spend a full day together, perhaps even 2 days. I think we must see each other and talk about your life. Will you come? Dochenka, not living next to each other doesn't mean living apart. I'm still with you always, in trouble and joy. No matter what happens, you must remember children have to be better, wiser, and more pure than their parents. They must accomplish what their parents could not. Be well, my dearest. Beloved, my smart little girl. And do write to Grandma. So this is the letters. Shall I say anything else? We got out. The paintings are all here. We published the book. The paintings were shown across the United States and in Europe. And now this memoir, when I was writing, I thought no one will care to read it. I started to write it. For 30 years, we did not talk about what had happened. But I have to tell you that every few years, my mother would say, I want my prison sentence overturned. But what point is it to make, to get justice from Putin's Russia? So we started to write to give my mother a word. And so now I'm very grateful to everyone who reads this memoir. It was just selected by the Women National Book Council for their best books list. And every time one person reads this memoir, I feel that a piece of justice goes to my mother and to everyone who didn't have a chance to tell their story. And right now I want to show you some slides, if we have time, or should we go to, maybe we should go to questions. let's ask the questions and I'll just do the question. Okay, I'm going to show the slides. Okay, my grandfather, his life. People he knew, my grandmother on the left, my mother on the right. Wartime children, more children. His father. Do you see anything wonky about the shadow?
It's the other way around.
It's the other way around. Yeah. It's Jewish, it's mysticism, right? It's the Hasidic mysticism. I'll say no more. More shadow. Do you see anything funky there? Okay, Rabbi,
The shadows are together.
the shadows are together. Do you see the one on the right?
Yeah,
What, anything there?
I'm getting my glasses.
I'm making it harder than it has to be. Anyone? Say? A couple of, maybe it's a bride. I always think of his parents, but that's, I think you were all right. Anyone else? To me too, yeah. Rabbi? No. Okay, to me, and I may be wrong, or I may be right. I see a rabbi in the talis, right? And they have.
Yeah, yes.
So they're full of puzzles. These works it's not what you see. So these paintings, we will not talk. I just showed them to you. This is the detail. You can see the ravine. So during the late 50s, there was a period of thaw, maybe happier time, better time in the Soviet Union. So his work become very bright and lovely, and it's also beginning of change in his work. Really quickly, just racing through this. I'll tell you, the stair is a prominent feature, and I want to ask you what you think when I say a stair or a ladder. But we'll get back to it. Okay, people with mouths closed, right? 1960s, America's civil rights union. So the woman on the left, the black woman on the left, the white woman on the right, the composition, lunch counter protests. And I think for the Soviet Jew, there was strong parallels, right? Let my people go. And I have to tell you, to give credit to Soviet Union, they were not racists. They were not racist, right? At least not officially. The Jews were the ones that they hated, not the ones. Okay, there's a lot to say about this painting, so I will not say anything. Anybody see the geese? The little girl with the basket. Does anybody see a ladder on the right? A stair?
See a face.
You did not. Oh, you stole.
Totally see a face.
You took the thunder out.
I'm sorry.
That's right. I'll show you the scale. Let me. Okay, so in a minute. I'll show you that you're so right. You're so observant. Okay, so in the Eastern Europe, the wooden synagogues, often they had the household stores in the floor in the shul upstairs. And many of those photographs were taken before the First World War. Most of the synagogues are gone. Louder? Speak. Okay, I'll say no more. Synagogues. Okay, Rabbi. So this is the answer to say that you're right. This is his thinking. These are the sketches. And Russian language is a gendered language, so everything, a building, a shul is a gender. So the shul is a woman, the synagogue is a female, a building, a house is a male. So there's a lot to say there. Windows, faces. Okay, back to this painting. And then, of course, right, the symbolism of the letter, right, is taken by Chagall and many Jewish painters, and also the Christian iconography, right, the Jacob's letter. I saw the angels going up and down, and I knew when I woke up that God is here, and I did not even know it. And this is a seamstress. There are many, many symbols there, but is it a seamstress? Do you see sheen on her where the tefillin is? There is a picture. You know, it's too complicated. So we're done. We're done. Questions?
Thank you.
I have a few questions to start with for Yelena, and we'll have a Q&A here, but we have to go and enjoy our bagel breakfast. I'm sorry? Right, yeah, okay. I know it was very, very painful coming here and arriving here, and your mother and you made a pact never to talk about it. But how did you get together with your mother to collaborate on this book?
I have to stand here so that our friends on Zoom could hear me. So, thank you for this question. So my mother wanted to write a book about her father, so I did that book for her. She did not want to write a book about our past. I did, and I wanted to do this all my life since I was a teenager, because there is nothing worse as to see your parents in that situation and be completely powerless to help. And so the only thing I could do is to remember, so that one day I could tell the story. The book I wanted to write is really part 2, my mother's story. I never thought it would be interesting to write about my childhood. But what I did when I sat down and I asked her to give me her part, and we recorded it. We had to be in different apartments. We did it on the phone because I didn't want her to see my reaction. But I was stunned because when she was telling me, it was the story in a perfect sequence, as if it all happened yesterday, as if she kept telling the story over and over and over again all these years. And after it was recorded, we edited it together. So,
Well, I have to say that the parts that you wrote about your childhood are very moving and very emotional. So it was a very good plan for you. Can you give us a brief idea of what your life was like when you came to the US?
it was normal.
That's a great answer. Okay, finally, when were you first able to exhibit your grandfather's art in this country?
Oh, that could be another book, I think. Thank you. These are very good questions.
And we have
And we
Q&A from everyone. We have some time for that. So if you have questions, please, Yelena's here to answer.
So I didn't mean to brush off this. We had a wonderful life. We have a good life. I love this country. We moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan. The people were very, very warm, and I would not change anything. For immigration is difficult. Any immigration, learning the language, learning the culture. You become mute. You realize you don't understand a word even if you study 10 years. And all of this is nothing compared to just the joy of being here and be free. What was the question you asked last? I'm sorry.
About exhibiting your grandfather's
Exhibiting, yeah. So the very first weeks when we came, we photographed the artwork, and of course we had the old bad camera, and we decided to photograph after drenching, overpowering sun. So are there any photographers here? You don't photograph artwork under the sun. It will all come out blue. So we had several rounds of photographing, but in Ann Arbor, the Jewish community of Ann Arbor mounted the exhibition, I think, the first year we were there. And then Bloomfield Hills Jewish Federation mounted another exhibition. And it was wonderful. And the second Babi Yar, the last Babi Yar, was exhibited for the very, very first time there. But right there, nobody paid attention to this because I think people didn't know who Buddy Earl was. And then after the book came out, we started to show the work, and the exhibitions kept coming. And he is fairly well known among specialists, but my mother's, but not enough, still work in progress. He started his education in Kiev during avant-garde. And my mother's dream was to place these paintings in the museums and to have a museum for his work. So one day, hopefully, it will come. So that's in a nutshell. We're on to 1053. Any?
It's my understanding that a lot of the artwork of that time of the Jews was brought out on microfilm. So how is she able to bring out the actual artwork?
So that's a good question, and it's, there is a part of the memoir where we describe it in detail, so I will just briefly say, so in the Soviet Union, the artwork does not belong to a family or even to the artist. You cannot bring it out freely. It's considered to be cultural heritage. But there was a process in the 70s and 80s that my mother and grandmother had to go through. And in Leningrad, when she applied, they were refused. They had to apply to Moscow, and they had to convince that these paintings were not exhibited because they had no artistic merit. And somehow, I think in Moscow, people were just kind, and they allowed, they understood what we were trying to do, and they understood that these paintings would perish if they were not with us.
It's actually a continuation of that question, because in the book you do describe that. You say that your grandmother went and spoke to them, but never really said what she told them or said them to get it released. Have you since learned what she said or did to get them released? Or you're just guessing?
Well, my mother and my grandmother had the whole question and answer kind of, before going there. And there were many arguments to be made. I think that one of the arguments was that my grandmother was part of the making these paintings. She had put together the canvases. She would stitch pieces out of the tapestry of old canvases because he couldn't buy the canvas. He couldn't sell his work. They lived in extreme poverty by choice. She was there when all these paintings, so she was part maker of them. I'm not sure what she said. I think that my grandmother, it was very difficult for her to leave the place on her own and to part with us in a place where she lived all her life.
Around this time period when you left, there was thousands of Jews went to Israel. Did you guys give any thought to going to Israel instead of here?
I think we did. I think that the decision, and I think my mother.
Will you repeat the question so people on Zoom?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, so it's a very good question. So many Jews, thousands of Jews went to Israel, and thousands more went to United States. Some went to Canada, to Australia, and other parts. Some went to France. And the question is, why did we choose to go to America? I think the ultimate driving decision was the paintings, and there was a great interest in the 70s and 80s in the Soviet non-conformism. And so I think we thought that the paintings my mother thought would have more opportunities here. She had many, many regrets about not going to Israel. She's observant Jew, and every time she goes there, she wants to stay.
Any other questions? Zoe?
Yeah, I was gonna wonder, how does Russia accept this book, or are they aware of your book, or how does that work?
Thank you. Zoe, thank you. So the question is, how did Russia accept this book? So I have to tell you that I wrote this book in Russian, but then the question was, after it was sketched out, the book sketched out, what language do I want it, who do I want this to be told to? And I wanted to tell it to my American children. And to all the friends who asked this question, what it was like to live in Russia. So then 5 years into writing this, I started another 5 years of translating it. So we published this book in English, and the Russian version is waiting for a better day.
Any other questions? Okay, let me thank you all. Yelena, thank you very much for a very lovely presentation. Thank you.
Please, if you read the book, please leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads.
Yelena will be we have her book for sale in the back room, and she'll be out, she's signing it. In addition to Yelena's book, we have the books from the entire book festival. We have copies of all of them, so if you want to get them, you may. Let me think. So we will repair to the lovely brunch that has been prepared by the sisterhood. And I want to thank you all, and thank you all on Zoom, and maybe next time you Zoomers will try and be in person and be able to partake of our lovely repast. Thank you for attending, one and all, in person and on Zoom. Thank you.